Welcome to Hip Replacement, the conversation between generations X, Y, and Z. I'm your host, Ben Dietz.
And I'm your host, Kyle Raymond Fitzpatrick. Every week we get together and talk with guests from Gen Z and beyond to try and understand just exactly what's going on in the current moment.
Because we're talking about these generations. All right, guys, we're back. This is Hip Replacement, episode number 6. Kyle, we're here with Byron Stewart. Please explain.
Yes, Byron Stewart of the newsletter Tapped In, all about social media and lots of different sort of cultural inputs. Byron formerly worked at Highsnobiety and Foot Locker and now is at Team Epiphany. He is a sort of like social media mega man, as I like to think.
Wow.
Byron, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me, Ben and Kyle. I'm really excited to chat with y'all today. And what an intro. I'm flattered. Thank you.
Well, I mean, Mega Man, how many times you get introduced as Mega Man in your life?
That's the first. That's the first. I'll take
There
it.
you go. Take it, run with it, put in a business card, do what you want with it.
Yes. Mega Man, let's do it.
All right. Well, so listen, Mega Man, we're talking today, as always, like this is the attempt of a Gen X person to try to understand developments in the contemporary world. And I wanted to start today with a couple of stories about style, not just because you come from High Snob and Foot Locker, but because I just think like these are emblematic of the current moment and ones that I thought were really interesting. The first one is in The Verge, and it was about artists who are it's basically like artists and Etsy sellers who are repurposing old technology into fashion items. And this article in particular brings up the Montreal-based artist Gab Bois and the person that I call culture craft artist Nicole McLaughlin, who's now based out in Boulder or Denver or something like that, but was in New York for a long time and is famous for her upcycling of weird objects. The thing that was interesting about this whole thing, right, for me is that it is emblematic of something that is tied very clearly to threat of recession, to generally like the state of culture and uncertainty that we get from the administration, from policy, from the markets, et cetera, et cetera. And it's about turning back internally to the things we already have and making something new out of them. Which I've seen before, right? I've lived through a couple of recessions and seen before, but I wonder if there's something, if it's as simple as that, or if there's something new here.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, it's very interesting, right? I think there's been some sort of fascination with Y2K, right? There's like this rush of Y2K nostalgia, and we're seeing these items that were highly coveted at that time being sort of reintroduced, or at least the new generation is discovering it and modernizing like its application to the world right now. So I think that article you pulled was super interesting because essentially people are taking these, very innovative items at that time and sort of like reintroducing them in their own unique way. So creating wearable pieces. And I mean, I think what I've been seeing lately is just like people want to sort of connect back to the simpler times because today seems, for lack of a better word, very stressful. I mean, I think we're all old enough to have experienced like some very crazy events throughout our lifetime, but like this younger generation for sure right now are probably just like kind of fed up with it, right? With just like the intrusiveness of social media and just the negativity and just all the things happening in the world. Now we're dealing with tariffs and people want to go back to the times where things were simple and life was good. So I do see a lot of people sort of reconnecting with Y2K in a real cool way.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I went to an exhibition of Gab's work that was put on by the French technology resale market, back market in, I don't know, January or something like that. And there was one item in particular that I thought was really actually kind of fascinating. It was a series of old wired AirPods turned into like a balaclava that you could put on the balaclava and then you could actually, listen to your phone or whatever with it. And it was cute and it's twee and it's an art object, but it also doesn't. I don't know. It didn't feel like the kind of thing you would ever see actually mass produced. Right. I mean, how much of the thing being one-off is important?
I think that a big part of this to the one-offness and I think to the sort of nostalgia and the state of the time. So I think a lot of this also has to do with like sustainability, both of the products and the products themselves, and also of fashion as well, is that like these are both really resource intensive, waste enabling worlds that like being able to find a new home for them in a way and a use for them that does like sort of keeps them out of the trash and keeps them out of becoming sort of whatever sort of end of life that we're used to, is definitely, I think, a product of these sort of, let's say, younger people who are doing all the stuff that you talked about, Byron, sort of making these sort of like maybe one-off art pieces, because it's just like, I'd rather it be a sort of like jacket you wear every so often than like it being in the trash and sort of like killing a small squirrel somewhere. So like that is like, I think,
as opposed to a large squirrel
to a large squirrel, which I think is sort of like a part of it. And I think the other thing too that is sort of funny is maybe the wrong word, but like interesting, is that like this is, whether or not these sort of go mainstream, I do think like the sort of manicure is more mainstream than like the Nicole McLaughlin stuff, which is more definitely like prototype slash imaginary something, but they do sort of enable something. But it gets at this sort of like retro futurism, or like actually what steampunk is, because like those are really sort of cheesy in some ways, but like that's actually what it looks like in practice, is like this sort of like adopting and making it more real, more real and useful in ways that it wasn't used. And I think that is sort of like where we'll sort of see things going. I think sort of like Julia Fox is a great example of really sort of championing a lot of clothes that are upcycled in this way. And I think that is, this is the beginning of something, obviously.
Well, I guess that, I mean, I think that's ultimately my question, right? It's like, do the kids care? Like there was an article in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend, which I didn't link to, but which you may have seen, about the rise of trashcore in Hollywood, as it was called, which was, now bear in mind, this is a story in the Wall Street Journal. So this is not, I don't think we're really discovering anything per se. Shout out to Rory who wrote it, but like, this is the idea that you're going to put your burgundy True Religion jeans on together with an acid green sweatshirt, and you're going to look unkempt and sort of thoughtless, but it's all going to come from this very like well thought out, like trying extremely hard to look random kind of feeling. And I can see, I don't know, it just, all of it just seems like, it seems possibly illusory. I just don't know if real people are doing any of this stuff, and that's what I guess I'm wondering about.
I would say probably not. I don't think real people are doing that. And for the record, I have a hot take. Can we just like stop using core? Everything's a core now, right? Like,
I like,
you woke up, now it's like, good morning core. It's like they add core to everything now. It's just very funny to me. That's it. That's all I had to say.
Okay, that is true. I mean, like the idea of core, the word core as the contemporary equivalent to a hashtag circa 2010 is that is kind of interesting. I would hate to lose all my cores. I have so many.
God.
No, keep your cores. It's good to have cores. They just adding core to everything. It's like, all right.
Yeah, fair enough.
No. But
go.
All right.
I did have a quick thought on the article we were just talking about, because
please.
I did come across, I wish I had this tweet handy, or X post, I should say, but essentially they were showing the designs of early 2000s phones, and they were saying how like back then it was so much, the design language was so much innovative to what we're looking at now. So I wanted to ask you guys, do you feel like, looking back at Y2K, sort of piggying back on the fact that people are sort of like using these type of designs or tech for wearable items, do you think the design language was stronger then than it is now?
I mean, yeah, I think it's stronger language. I don't know whether it's better language. I mean, I think that's really the kind of like key thing, right? Like it's design is such an interesting world, because on the one hand you have Dieter Rams and the whole idea of less is more, total minimalism, and fetishizing that approach, and then you have Gio Ponte on the other hand, like fetishizing maximalism and craze, and the truth probably lies somewhere in between. But I don't know. I mean, like having been on the consumer edge of those technologies in real time, I don't know that I necessarily thought of them as being like, wow, this is just fantastic. Like the Palm Pilot, not a fantastic device, guys. It just wasn't. But it was the best thing you could get at the time, and so you're like, okay, great.
I mean,
but it looked cool.
It looked cool.
It looked cool. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe.
Well, to that
like with
point,
your little tiny pencil, you're like writing in shorthand with your little tiny pencil. I don't know. I'm not so sure.
No. Well, I was going to say, I think to that point, exactly that it looked cool is that, like, I think a lot of it was less about the sort of application and usefulness of that. Like, I think that was less of like design as problem solving and more design as play in a way, and design as
that's a great point.
Marketing.
So more Ponti-esque in that regard.
Totally. Because like I think that was sort of maybe how you ended up with the Razor. That wasn't for adults. That was supposed to be for teens, and it worked. And I think we sort of see like that sort of design language disappeared from electronics, let's say, because Apple got sort of mainstream to look like one specific thing, and maybe got adapted into what was that? I was just having a conversation with somebody about this a few weeks ago about like food products, that like food products sort of took on that sort of unique design aesthetic, and like that's sort of how we ended up with like now every there's 17 different
shoppy shops and the whole
exactly that's how we ended up with that, because like what used to be in phones and used to be unique there is now literally every product, and that's why there's so much shit.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not in a particular hurry to go back to my Motorola StarTAC. Was it a StarTAC? Was that the name of that thing? I don't remember.
Well, StarTAC.
Anyway, my first phone. So but that actually does bring up another point, and we're kind of skipping around a little bit, but Byron, you raised, and this is the second week in a row that we will have talked about it, the article in the Times, Brian X. Chen's review of the light phone, the vaunted dumb phone, and whether it would help him cure his brain rot. His conclusion was that it did not. I mean, from the article. His conclusion was, I made an artificial choice that made my life more difficult, and while that was sort of an interesting experiment, it is not one I'm going to stick with. I definitely empathize with that. I don't know. Do either of you guys think like, okay, get these apps off my phone, I'm ready?
Yeah, I actually tried it before.
Really? Okay.
The actual phone?
No.
Okay.
So like I have an iPhone. I've been an Apple guy. I've been in Apple's ecosystem forever.
Yeah.
And it's hard escaping it. But with that said, like I'm the reason why this article really attracted me and I found it super interesting is because like I can speak for those who are in social and have been in social for a while at this point. Like you're constantly consuming content, and you're on social all day long, right? And it can definitely wear on you, and there's a lot of wear and tear in the space. And I'm learning and I'm finding, at least for myself personally, and also with my peers in the industry, like a lot of people want to find ways to disconnect and sort of get away from the hustle and bustle of being always on from a social media marketing standpoint, because it is definitely can be draining. So I'm sort of in a space where I'm looking for ways to sort of distract myself from being online, right? Like being more offline. And I've heard about this light phone, and we're seeing the rise of dumb phones. Like Heineken is doing this like dumb phone campaign, and then they just dropped a new launch recently, if I'm not mistaken. And even with like Gen Z, the idea is to do more in real life activations or experiences, and sort of like remove yourself from being always on digitally, even from a dating standpoint, like meeting people in real life. Dating apps are actually struggling, trying to find how to attract people back to their dating apps now, because people want to meet in person now. So, well, all that being said, I found this very interesting, and I tried it where I sort of like minimize my usage of these apps. So like I'll set like timers or restrictions where I can only open Instagram 3 times a day. I'm spitballing, but it was more than that. But like 5 times a day for 30 minutes at a time. And I tried it, and it worked. I did it for like a week. It worked probably for the first like 2 or 3 days. I was like, okay, I like this. Like I was super focused in the gym. I wasn't picking up my phone all the time. But then, work hit, and then I had to like sort of like do some discovery and reach out to people. And then like, just like that, I was back into the mix. So I'm still battling this to this day. I'm still trying to find ways to disconnect. But when I see articles speaking about dumb phones or this new light phone, I'm like thinking about like maybe I should try to pick up one myself and experience it. But after seeing the final verdict that he sort of realized like I'm too connected to technology and it's hard for me, it's like part of my everyday routine and life, that kind of like really resonated with me. And I was like, yeah, so am I. I would have to probably do a lot of reorganization in my life.
I mean, I feel like these phones are they're selling less of a product and more of the idea of you disconnecting, which we know is not actually going to be possible for a lot of people. Like, also working in bits of social media as well, is like, I know it's not possible. I know I can't have a phone that doesn't have Instagram because I have to log on sometimes and post for a brand. And it's like, it's why I hate Instagram, but also the reality of like why I need a phone that has it. And like, but I think that is sort of like why these phones are successful or could be successful is because they're selling that idea that you can log off when we know that's not true. I think what it really is getting at is like, to what you just said, Byron, just like taking matters into your own hands, and like instead of getting a product that sort of is selling you the freedom, is just like you actually like training your dog, and the dog is your phone and your computer and whatever. And I think people just aren't doing that because like you'd rather buy a solution than actually change yourself.
I feel
myself the same.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what it was. Oh, here's an interesting thing, and I just want for the crew. There was an episode of How Long Gone recently where Jim James from My Morning Jacket was on, and he was talking about how he had taken Instagram off his phone and he only looked at it on desktop. And that had created this distance for him that was very healthy, and he was advising other people to do it. You guys know anybody that does that?
I use Instagram desktop a lot, but again, I'm all the way into deep.
That's because that struck me as he was like remarkably thoughtful and measured. I think so much so that it kind of annoyed Chris and Jason because they were just like, "Come on, dude, say something spicy," which he refused to do. But it was. I thought that was actually clever. I was like, okay, well, the desktop app is actually good enough. You can do it that way. It's not great for stories, but otherwise you can do it that way. Like maybe do it that way. But I've never heard of anybody else adopting that. So I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, for those who are curious, I mean, TikTok's desktop version is pretty good now too. So like the platforms are like definitely updating their desktop experiences. Again, the goal is to keep you engaged on the app. So no matter where you are, you need to find a way to connect to the platform.
We're centering back around the Gen Z experience or the Gen X experience of just things on a web browser now.
Right.
Eventually, we're all going to get back to that.
I can see it.
Centering myself in the conversation again. All right. Well, I want to center myself in the conversation one more time, and that is there was the other thing that I sent you guys was this Mr. Porter article about how to dress when you're 40, which I have some thoughts about, mainly because when I was 40, I probably would have looked at something like that and thought to myself, yeah, I need some rules. I need to get this together. Like I need some organization in my life. As I approach 50, all the rules are out the window. Like Robin Williams and Murakami are becoming more and more interesting to me by the minute in terms of their totally outrageous outfits. My son is rolling his eyes and cringing super hard on the prediction booth right now. But in any case, I just like, as you guys look at that, codes like that are obviously they're easy for organizational purposes. They're great from a business perspective because you can pack them full of affiliate links and then you can, like demonstrate influence or whatever. But does anybody pay attention to shit like that?
I think
go for it.
It's really quickly. I think it's stories like that are for a very specific person, a very specific type of man. Because like I read that and I think like I was able to see like the base of my brain, my eyes like rolled back so far. I was like, okay, chill out. Like you need permission to do all of these things. Okay, you need to go take a walk around the block. You need to like go look at a tree or something. But like it seemed like it was like it's for a specific type of guy who needed that permission and who needs that sort of being led to water. For lack of better words, I imagine they're probably not as creative and they're probably very sort of rigid in sort of creative views because they're not creative. I think there's a purpose. I think like I've definitely written those stories over the year for different types of guys, and like I'm sure we all have in our ways done that, but it's like it's what's funny to me is that like that story is timeless. Like that clock will strike every year. There'll be a story like that by like a Q publication where there's somebody turning 40 on the staff and they pitch it and it goes through.
Well, I mean, like, I keep getting older and they just stay the same age, right? It's
exactly.
There's that phenomenon. The thing that it made me wonder though was that this idea of that kind of starter pack for the aspirational 40-year-old is has an analog in, Byron, the story that you sent us about the new Stussy store in New York being the most popular destination, right? Because there's a kind of like starter pack mentality where if I come to New York, I've got to get to the Stussy store and I've got to buy an item, and whether I'm there with grandma or I'm there by myself or I'm there with my kids, right? Which, might be the way I would show up there. There's this like prerequisite element to it. What was it about that story that jumped at you?
I think what was really cool about it was like, well, a few thoughts on this. One, the fact that New York Times reported on this, and I think New York Times is definitely over the last year or two has become more like culturally rooted as far as like bringing up more niche stories around different like around just all different types of like verticals that at least personally for me, I don't think they've been covering that, like covering things like that for a while. But I found it interesting that, they sort of recognize how popular Stussy has become over the years. And I've been a consumer of the brand for a very long time at this point. I guess I'm entering my unk phase in the next couple of years, but I just find it very interesting that it's now a multi-generational brand, and I think they've been very successful in reaching a very younger audience, from even Gen Z to like Gen Alpha to of course millennials to Gen X. Everyone shops there now. There's pieces for everyone. I think they do a great job tastefully like making pieces that can like sort of align with current trends, but also classic staples that a man can wear 20 years from now, right? So I thought it was just really cool that they did highlight that store. I don't like the fact that has become this attraction, because like a part of me, I do have that sort of like similar to like how sneaker culture went mainstream in like 2018, 2019, when people that didn't wear sneakers all of a sudden, wanted to wear sneakers, and I kind of side-eyed it because I'm just like, dude, you wasn't like
that gatekeeper energy.
Yeah. I have still have that gatekeeper energy, but then I appreciate the success of the brand. But then I also just like, I hate seeing all the hype beasts, TikTok hype beasts, just like in line. They don't know who the hell Sean Stussy is. They're just like, just buying it because it's hyped up.
Well,
That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's funny to hear you say that. Reminds me, I could have been in your seat in 2000 complaining about that, like when it was on Worcester Street and the head porter store was upstairs, and I'm just like, man, all these kids ruin everything. Couldn't get the dunks. But it is fascinating how these brands that seem like pop, they are street culture phenomena, are managed to be durable. And Stussy was the granddaddy of the whole scene and has now kind of gotten into its unk phase for sure. Yeah, it's funny. I
think an interesting thing about it too is that sort of, you're on a very good point about it being so intergenerational. I think that like, in an era of there being so many brands and things constantly coming and going, that like these streetwear brands, which now I think sort of span from Gen X through Gen A, are like becoming sort of strange, not strange is the wrong word, but like peculiar breakouts of like the new sort of like vanguards of like, not just American brands, but like just like, let's just say like the new like Ralph Lauren or whatever. I'm making that up, but like the new sort of like standby of like where certain generations would go to like buy, or cross generations would go to sort of like buy a nice thing, I guess, if that makes sense. And like I'm thinking of an example of where like this is in 2019, I think. Like I took my nephew to, all he wanted to do for Christmas was go to the Supreme store in LA. So I took him to the Supreme store for Christmas, and like he was like 13 or maybe even younger. And like it made his like world that like he knew somebody who knew what Supreme was and who could take him there and make him not look like a dork. And like that was like, it's such a funny experience. Like looking at the article, I was like, okay, that's clearly now like, it's sort of like, it's not unique to a certain kid anymore. Now it's sort of like becoming almost generational, which is very interesting, because I think that's something that people don't talk about, is that those brands have sort of become what, when I was growing, again, I'm making this up, it's not Ralph Lauren, but it's not Ralph Lauren from when I was sort of, when we were sort of younger. Now I think this is sort of like what the parents are maybe passing on to their kids, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. Well, it has to do with the flattening of the cultural timeline, period, right? Like adolescence has never been longer, middle age has never been shorter, old age has never been longer. It's like the weird way that the sort of cultural timeline has gotten shrunk. The interesting thing for me about Stussy is that it when it started, it was for a very particular kid. I mean, let's euphemistically say kids. And whereas Ralph started with the intention of being multi-generational, right? Like Ralph was like, we are trying to be the next Brooks Brothers or the next great American fashion brand for everybody, kind of, or everybody of a certain, sort of stature. And Susie has become that, has taken on that applicability organically, which is fascinating because there are not a lot of good examples of that otherwise. No. I don't think.
No, it's not.
Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about something that actually is targeted at youth, but has a strange universality as well, which, Kyle, is your story about Sabrina Carpenter in Fortnite. I found this very strange. That I mean, okay, so I think of Sabrina Carpenter as like the most plastic of the plastics. And I don't know, Kyle, I see your expression there. I'm not sure maybe you agree, but either way, I just like there's something like so artificial about her that I don't know. I don't know whether I find it beguiling or disgusting. I just evokes feelings in me. But the idea that Sabrina Carpenter, who is ultra feminine, gets put into this very sort of, mask-coated Fortnite combat world and becomes a super popular skin, and not even in combat, but rather in just like these congregations and dances. The whole thing just mystifies me. But everybody seems to like it, including the hardcore game guys. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna just chime. I mean, one, your take is hilarious. Two, I think that's the hook. The fact that she's this, such a feminine figure, and she's putting into this ultra, hyper, not, I guess, violent, technically it is, but hyper violent, environment digitally. And, and now like it sort of created this new way of playing on the game. Like people are congregating and doing her dance emotes and wearing her and refusing to shoot characters that are having, her skins on is pretty hilarious, but I think it's fantastic. I love the collab.
I think it's so brilliant. I remember when it first was announced, I was like, that's a little weird. Less weird for any other reason than it's like, I don't see how these overlap, but then like seeing it in action, I was like, oh, this is perfect. Because like I think the thing, and I think to your point, Ben, of like the sort of like view of who Sabrina Carpenter is, I think a lot of people just really categorize her in this way where it's just like she just is that blonde who makes that pop music in that space. But I think like she doesn't get enough credit for being really strangely subversive, because she fits in, like she like looks like this Barbie, but is like going to like hyper sex territories, which is brilliant. And is like, her lyricism is so funny and so hilarious, and like really, like I remember, when the album dropped last year, like it really sort of hit across different cultures, different demographics, different ages, because like she's appealing in so many ways. And then on top of it, like she's a bit of a like and a few artists have done this. I think namely coming to mind is like obviously Lil Nas X and Doja Cat, and there's a few others, but like she is like a really like world-class troll. And I think that's really where the success and where the merging works really well. It's because like she is a brilliant like clapback trolling, like she has like a deep rotted internet brain, or at least like the performance of her does, and that is why like it has sort of taken off, is because
it's trollcore.
It's 100%, and like it's like the people who get it got it, and like the people who didn't, they reluctantly gave in to like this sort of hijacking, and it's so perfect. And like they do the Fortnite festival every year, and like there's not been a breakout like this. And that's what's so interesting, is that like it really dominated. I didn't think people like to sleep on her, but like she's.
No, I mean that thing. Like, look, just to be very clear here, like I don't have anything against Sabrina Carpenter, but I find her very artificial. Yeah. And there are other there are
she's a former Disney star.
And like, I mean, well, like, I don't know if you guys remember Poppy from, a few years ago, but it's like Poppy, the artificiality was the gag. And I guess like that's a territory that I feel a little bit more comfortable in, because it's like, okay, this is artifice for artifice sake, as opposed to like this weird, where are we playing kind of vibe. But I think you're right that it gets to the uncertainty of the current moment. Like, where are we is kind of the statement for the day, which brings to mind another your other story, Kyle, or one of your other stories was the current trend on TikTok of asking millennials to say how they survived the 2008 financial recession. What's
so
going on
ridiculous? It's just Gen Z, which I think is classic Gen Z getting way worked up, not over nothing, but getting really worked up on something that they should probably research and just live life around.
Mm-hmm.
Like, instead of doing that, instead of sort of figuring out yourself, you sort of turn to the internet and try to like ask people that you have, for the record, like made fun of and like dunked on for now like nearly a decade. You sort of come to their feet, sort of begging, begging for like help, and like the millennials are like, yeah, like we like normal people. We didn't spend money. We had parties at our house. We ate cheap food and cheap wine, and we were poor. Like, I don't think you guys know how to be poor. And like, that's like sort of where this is sort of where sort of has gone to, is that there's sort of like, again, I think this, and I sort of wrote about this yesterday in the Trump report, is that like, I think that like that sort of like asking the question by Gen Z sort of again reveals that like they don't know how to do any research. They're sort of illiterate in that way. But then it's also just like this sort of disconnection to like real life in ways that isn't convenient. Meaning that like, you know, Gen X, millennials, beyond grew up in a time where everything didn't come from Amazon, where you couldn't just go to the Target right down the street because it didn't exist. And you had to sort of like wait and save and work. And now everything's so convenient. It's like, well, what am I going to do if I can't get my what? And it's like, okay, well, like, what if you have no fucking money? Like, that's a bigger question happening here. So it's a bit of, I think, a sort of growing pain we're seeing, because it's only going to get worse in a way. I think this is the first sort of like cry for help. But again, it's like, you know, we got to change. We got to teach these children how to change.
Do you feel like, okay, so Byron, a question for you then. Do you feel like do our brands have any responsibility in any of this? Like, I don't mean they have responsibility for it, right? Clearly, everybody is implicated. But more what I mean is like, do brands have any responsibility to step up and say, hey guys, I know you're uncertain, I'm going to calm things down? Or alternately, do they just go even crazy or brain rotted and just get, you know, like turn Sabrina and Fortnite up to 10?
Great question. Right. I think it depends on the brand. I think a perfect example of that, I forgot, you guys probably remember when Calm came out with that brand spot, when it was like, it was something chaotic happening at the time. I'm trying to think. It was very recent, but they came out with a brand spot where they were like, I know it's stressful right now, but just take a few breaths.
Yes.
What was the event that was aligned with?
I think it was for the Super Bowl. Like, it was like around something like that. Maybe it wasn't the Super Bowl. It was like something right before. But yes,
that had a lot of money on parlays. It was stressful.
Stressful time for sure. My point is that made sense for them because it sort of aligned with their brand identity about using this app to relieve stress. And right now we're living in very high stress times for people. And, you know, that's a way for them to sort of introduce their brand and also provide value. And I say that for individuals or generation Gen Z who's experiencing like this new, you know, idea of struggle essentially with society, that if you're a brand that could sort of ease that, you know, feeling, like you should probably lean into it from a marketing perspective. Like, it was controversial, but I think a brand had did something with eggs. It was sort of like this artistic activation with eggs. Yeah, and people felt
Wait, who was that?
I forgot. I don't know. I forgot the brand. I can't think of the brand right now. But
I thought Kyle said he knew.
No, yeah, it was the Ordinary and Mischief. They sort of teamed up to do like Ordinary eggs.
Got it.
Yes. So they got some heat for that because people felt that was insensitive, given that eggs are super expensive and most people, you know, a lot of people can't afford them technically. I definitely don't agree with that. However, on the flip side, if you have the ability to, like, for example, I'm spitballing, but, you know, make eggs accessible to a wide number of people in a cool way, like, that's the way of giving back during a high stressful environment.
I think the thing that's happening is that, like, or what needs to happen is, like, the issue is that there's so much, both culturally and the powers that be have sort of enabled this, a la recession, is like, there's just so much helplessness, whether it's learned, real, or not. And like the way through in any regard, and like some of the millennials' responses sort of speak to this, is like empowering people to become autonomous and to be able to make solutions. And like, I think that's the thing that's missing is, and I think we sort of talked about this last week even, it's like brands have sort of like, you know, say millionaires, billionaires, have sort of lost that sort of philanthropic greater good element. And like as a result, like everybody's just a shopper and buyer, whatever, and like no one is able to function in human ways anymore or able to help each other. And so like the modeled behavior is then helplessness. So like that's the opportunity. Whether or not that will be taken is to be seen, because is that profitable?
Is to get people out of their infantilized state into one of self-sufficiency, where they're.
But you want them to be infants, because then they'll just keep buying those bottles.
Yeah.
Well, or mom and dad will, right? Like
exactly.
Somebody,
totally.
Yeah. Ay. All right. Well, I don't want that. I don't want that. I want the kids off the payroll ASAP.
Yes.
I was going to bring up the tariff situation, because that's, you can't escape that conversation right now.
In what?
Just sort of what we're just talking about, like the responsibility that brands can potentially have during times like these.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think the retail landscape is definitely experiencing a major shift, because if you're a brand that continuously messages like buy, like you're a little bit on the tone deaf side, because you're more than likely your consumers feeling the strain of or feeling the impact of the current economic climate. So it's more so like, instead of being more sales narrative driven, which of course you got to make sales and push product, I get that part, but maybe your messaging should be more value based, right? So like I think it's a great time for brands to sort of reassess how they communicate to their consumer, because of these like conditions in society.
All right. Well, I presume that the two of you guys as social media managers will get in and, or at least, as part of your various roles, we will get in and start doing that immediately.
Trying.
It is. These are already conversations that are definitely happening. The issue is people are leaving social media. The spaces are noisier, and the algorithms are changing as they always are. So, like, are you even going to be able to connect? It might be even easier just to like go out and like put a sign on a wall outside. You might connect actually better with people that way.
How about
Very
that?
True.
Outdoor advertising, the technology of the future.
Dumb advertising.
Man. All right. Well, I think feel like a good place to wrap. Like no particular answers, but a bunch of really good thoughts and directional, advice for how to go forward. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a wise bow to wrap this up in, but
Byron, this is awesome. This is awesome. I love the conversation between you guys.
Cool.
Likewise.
Well, listen, we and obviously we love having you here. So thank you for joining us on hip replacement. For those listening, we do this every week with a new guest. Although we will have people back at some point in the future. So Byron, I hope you'll come and join us again down the road, and we'll get to see maybe if Susie can get into a 5th generation of appeal. And but beyond that, so do the whole like and subscribe boogie, please, on Spotify and on YouTube. And Byron, anything you want to plug before we are out of here? Where do people find you?
Yes, absolutely. You can find me on Substack. My newsletter is called Tapped In. I have, I write a lot of thoughts about, the topics we were just discussing, as well as some insight on social media. So that's Tapped In. And then I'm also big on LinkedIn. So not big like I'm a star, but I mean, I'm very, I love LinkedIn. Yes. Yes, I'm active. Thank you. So follow me on LinkedIn. We'd love to have, some convos there. So really, really appreciate you guys having me.
By all means. All right, Kyle, till next week.
Till next week.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.